Welcome to After Dark Online. Thanks for joining us as we continue to learn about our world through science, art, and conversation. My name is Sam Sharkland, and I'm a program developer as part of the team that produces After Dark. And though this program is virtual, the Exploratorium is located on Pier 15 in San Francisco, on unceded territory belonging to the Ramaytush Ohlone. We recognize that we are guests on this land, and we honor the conservation and stewardship they've offered the ecology we inhabit, both past and present. This month at After Dark Online, we're zooming out to a planetary scale and looking at the celestial mechanics that influence what we experience on Earth. Central to that experience is the position of our closest and most familiar neighbors, the Sun and the Moon. When the Sun, Moon, and Earth all line up, it creates a phenomenon we call an eclipse. Now, there's all sorts of eclipses: partial eclipses, lunar eclipses, annular or ringed eclipses, but nothing compares to the total obfuscation of the sun's disk during a total solar eclipse. Tonight, we'll learn about the spectacular and rare phenomena that is the total solar eclipse, when the moon moves in between the Earth and the sun, casting a pinpoint shadow that goes across the globe. In just 4 days, on December 14th, there will be a total solar eclipse happening over South America, over parts of Chile and Argentina. Now, historically, the Exploratorium has sent a crew to broadcast live from the path of totality. Due to the pandemic and health and safety concerns, we are not sending a crew to Chile this year. But of course, the eclipse will still be happening whether we send a crew there or not, and lucky observers within the path of totality will get to experience the eclipse live in person. Though we're sorry to miss it, we are glad to be able to share the news and look forward to the next total solar eclipse, which will be happening over North America in 2024. More on that later in the broadcast. But stay with us through the next hour as we recount the history of Exploratorium's broadcast of total solar eclipses over the decades and hear directly from two of our staff members who have been there to witness them. First, we'll chat with astronomer Isabel Hawkins about her personal experiences of eclipses, and then a conversation with Chief Science Officer Rob Semper about what technology, ingenuity, and luck it takes to produce an internationally broadcast view of the eclipse. But first, what's the big deal with seeing a total solar eclipse? For some insight, take a look at this time-lapse montage of totality witnessed from Casper, Wyoming in 2017.
You see that black disk coming over the surface of the sun? That's not something made out of cardboard. That's the moon, the backside of the moon, covering the sun and moving forward.
I'm very excited, and I was just realizing I feel slightly anxious.
Slightly anxious,
like
in a good way or a bad way?
Well, in a good way.
Great,
yeah,
great.
Yeah, it's just like...
En vivo estamos viendo las manchas solares en nuestro telescopio en blanco de aquí de Casper, Wyoming. Vemos esas manchas.
Light, you'll see that they're dark on the surface of the sun. And what they are is areas where the magnetic field is so strong that the normal flow of hot material from underneath actually is stopped. Well, it's not stopped completely.
Cool. We've been hot all morning. I've been running around, but right now it's cool. It's also interesting. The crowd was tittering and making a lot of noise, but now it's gone almost very quiet.
It's getting very spooky right now.
Everybody's sort of right on the edge waiting, and it's so exciting, and I can see just the sliver of the sun left there.
It's very thin. I've never seen it so dark. The temperature it's dropped, I'm going to guess at least 8 or 10 degrees.
And there's the diamond rings. Oh my God!
Coming back.
It's still, and now we have to put on our glasses.
Spectacular.
The Earth's magnetic field protects us from cosmic rays, so does the sun's. So when the sun is more active, we have more protection from galactic cosmic rays.
We know that the corona is the outer atmosphere of the sun.
Magnetic fields then spread out through the entire solar system and actually blows a bubble in interstellar space.
It can affect us here at Earth, right?
It can affect us here at Earth. Those magnetic fields can hit the magnetic field of the Earth and cause the magnetic field of the Earth to move. That's what we call geomagnetic storms.
Sunspots, that's incredible detail.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what people might not notice normally is that around the sunspots there are these bright regions that are called plages, and those
I think I'm actually crying,
French word for beach.
It was the best thing I've ever seen.
The sky does weird things during an eclipse, so we've had clear skies here, but now the clouds have come in.
It is. I think the change in the temperature sometimes causes clouds to
Es una
form or
experiencia
to
completamente
dissipate.
diferente.
No importa si ya lo has visto en persona, cada corona es diferente, cada situación es completamente diferente y ha sido una emoción tremenda.
I'm sure you could hear the excitement and wonder in many of those voices watching Totality. One of those voices was Exploratorium's very own astronomer, Dr. Isabel Hawkins. We'll turn to a conversation with her to hear more about what it's like to personally experience a total solar eclipse. Dr. Isabel Hawkins is an astronomer and project director at the Exploratorium. She received her PhD in astrophysics at the University of California, Los Angeles in 1986. She worked for 20 years at the University of California, Berkeley as a senior fellow on several NASA satellite projects and as the director of science education at the Space Sciences Laboratory. Her work focuses on collaborating with integrity with indigenous knowledge holders and Western scientists to broaden access to science and enhancing participation by all communities through the appreciation of the cultural roots of science. Isabel received 8 NASA awards between 2004 and 2008 for her work on NASA education and public outreach. Isabel was the host of the Spanish-language broadcast of our total solar eclipses in 2017 and 2019. Before we get to the conversation, check out this elegant and simple tutorial that she presented on total solar eclipses and how they work.
The most amazing thing was when I was in Turkey in 2006 and I saw a total solar eclipse live and in person. I am just getting chills, literally and figuratively, about the excitement of this amazing spectacle. As an astronomer, I felt lucky enough to be witnessing the fact that we are part of a moving solar system in which you have the Earth, Sun, and Moon interacting together. As a person, I felt very moved when I saw totality in the middle of the day. Totality is when the moon covers completely the sun. And so all the light that we normally see during the day from the photosphere of the sun completely disappears. And the only thing that you are left seeing is a dark sun, completely blackened. And then on the outside of the sun, the corona is visible. So we're going to show you what happens to create totality, to create this darkness in the middle of the day on the Earth's surface as a result of a total solar eclipse. So basically I have a fictitious sun behind me, which is a light source, pretending that it's the sun, and we have the Earth and we have the moon. So the moon actually travels in front of the Earth, covering the sun, and that's what causes the total solar eclipse. Did you see that shadow, Lily?
I did.
There it is.
It's
so basically that shadow creates what is called a path of totality, which will be a strip of darkness. This is not exactly to scale, but it is helpful to see. It's very simple. The shadow of the moon is cast upon the surface of the Earth. The moon is indeed much smaller than the sun. 400 of these little moons will actually cover the diameter of the sun. But the moon is also 400 times closer to us, and that is what creates the total solar eclipse, which is an amazing cosmic coincidence. So to illustrate what I'm talking about, I'm going to use my thumb, which is much smaller than your head, to try and cover it. So if I try to cover it here, I close one eye, you're still very visible. But if I bring my thumb very close to my eye, eventually your entire face is actually covered. And that is what's happening. And you can try this at home. Do that with different objects and different distances using your thumb and closing one eye, and you'll be able to understand why the moon, which is 400 times smaller than the sun, but is 400 times closer to us, can actually cause the sun to be completely obscured in a total solar eclipse.
If the moon goes around the Earth once a month, how come we don't have an eclipse every month?
The orbit of the moon around the Earth is actually slanted, so most of the time the moon will actually travel above the plane of the Earth and the Sun line or below the plane of the Earth-Sun line and not cause an eclipse. We are not going to have a total solar eclipse forever. And that is because the moon is actually receding from the Earth. The distance is actually increasing due to tidal forces. And so, of course, as the moon recedes from the Earth, it covers a little bit less and less of the solar disk during an eclipse. But this will happen in 500 million years. So we still have time to go out there and catch a beautiful total solar eclipse.
Well, thank you, Isabel, for joining us to share more about your experiences with total solar eclipses. We just watched that instructional video where you showed us the mechanics of what happens during a total solar eclipse when the moon comes between the sun and the earth and casts a shadow. But in this demonstration, that was solar scale. So we just saw that little pin spot crossing the globe. You've been to total solar eclipses, and it must be a completely different experience when you're actually the person underneath that shadow.
Well, really, it's a completely different experience, Sam, and thank you for showing that clip and for asking me this amazing question, which really speaks to our interaction and our belonging to our solar system. What I felt when I was under the shadow of the moon during this total solar eclipse in Turkey, actually in 2006, was the fact that we're part of a moving solar system. I really felt, I'm getting chills right now. It's weird. I didn't expect that I would get chills. So it's really an emotional moment. It's a moment in which you throw all your science and all your training and all your astrophysics and mathematics out the window, and you're just giving yourself up to this unique experience in which our trusted nearest star, the sun, actually almost disappears, not completely, but almost disappears from the sky. And you just see the corona during totality, which is this wispy atmosphere of the sun, and right in the center, a stark black disk, which is basically the moon that has come in front of the photosphere of the sun, obscuring the brightest part. And leaving it black. And so it's just like, wow. Besides that, what's interesting, we don't see that in our videos as much, is the fact that your environment has really changed. For example, it gets much colder. You see a 360-degree sunset or sunrise, whatever we want to call it, around you. The birds start to chirp, crickets, you see stars and planets. It's absolutely magnificent. It was 2.5 minutes in 2006. It seemed like an eternity.
We actually have a clip from that broadcast. The Exploratorium went to Turkey, and we have tape of your first experience of a total solar eclipse. I'm going to share my screen here.
What an amazing experience. I am just getting chills, literally and figuratively, about the excitement of this amazing spectacle.
Well, here it comes. We've got the camera. Oh, we got some Bailey's beads. One last little dot, and now, oh,
look at the prediction.
It's incredible. There's the streamers coming out in the corona. It's the most amazing corona I've ever seen in all my solar eclipses. Here we are at a period of quiet sun, the minimum, and yet the corona is fantastic. Here comes the sun. Let's go to the whole sun view. Diamond ring, a fantastic diamond ring. There it is.
What a fantastic experience, Paul.
That was amazing.
So that sounded like so much fun. Can you talk a little bit more about that first experience and those things that we were noticing in that moment or minute of totality?
I had seen other total solar eclipses that we had produced with the Exploratorium in prior years, like there was one in 1999 from Turkey as well, and one from Aruba. But nothing can prepare you for the actual experience of seeing a total solar eclipse. And I think which one was your first, Sam? Was it
my first and only total solar eclipse was in 2017 in Wyoming. I got to see it.
Okay. So we were there together, I remember. So you were hosting the English program, I was hosting the Spanish program. And it's amazing. Nothing can prepare you because there are so many things going on. First of all, the fact that you're a fountain of energy and life is temporarily being obscured. So even though consciously what's happening, that is the mechanics, celestial mechanics, and we can predict it with exquisite accuracy, everything that we know about eclipses. But even so, there is an emotional component that is something that you cannot control. So I was actually literally crying. Yeah, the first time. It's funny. The second time I didn't cry. It's funny. You just almost get used to it. But it was fantastic, and it was a great honor to share that moment with our amazing Dr. Paul Doherty, who has since passed away. But we really had a great collaboration during that time, and I really appreciated it. And the diamond ring is something absolutely spectacular. You should not look at the diamond ring without eye protection, but we could see it in the monitor. And that's the beauty of actually transmitting the eclipse through our images and our telescopes, which have the best quality and the best resolution, is that you can see all of these details. I mean, perhaps some of you who were looking at the image saw that there was a prominence in there at the edge of the sun. That, you just see the detail. You can see sunspots. You can see so much by using our telescopes. Is actually fantastic.
And one thing I really like about that clip too is that you can hear the audience in the background cheering for those exact same moments that you just described, the diamond ring appearing or disappearing. And you talk about it also being shared, and with our colleague Paul Doherty, but also with the community that is out there in Turkey. And I want to put up a slide of the mayor that you got to meet and interact with in Turkey there, because that is also part of the experience, isn't it?
Absolutely. Oh, there he is. That's Mayor Kalikulak from Turkey. I've never forgotten his hospitality. We were in the town of Side. He was the mayor of Side in Turkey. And it was a coastal town, very beautiful, very touristy. We were there in March, so it was before the official tourist season had actually launched. But this town became overcrowded with people because of the eclipse. And he was ready. He was a leader there. And of course, we had to invite him to share a bit about the place. We love to share the sense of place, our relationship with the community. And so he was there to explain about his own town and about all the work that we have done together for several years, in preparation for this. So we really almost become a family, an eclipse family, waiting for this cosmic event, this amazing dance between the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun. And we're all under it together, working toward a common cause, which is basically to enjoy this beautiful natural phenomenon, understand the science, and understand the cultural significance for all of us. But there's always some things that happen during these productions. We take 2 tons of equipment across the world to produce these kinds of live programs. There's a lot of behind the scenes that goes on. And one of the things that ends up happening many times is that our crew needs to be really taken care of because we work long hours. People forget to eat, they forget to drink water. I mean, so there was a moment in there in which we had no potable water nearby because we were inside a Roman amphitheater.
Yeah.
In this little town. And so, there was no bathroom that you could just go and open a tap. And so this mayor, this amazing host, got a huge Coke machine with cold soda, water, sparkling water, I remember, and some snacks. And he had the machine delivered to the amphitheater so that we could have proper snacks and we would never go thirsty or hungry. So those are the kinds of details and small gestures which mean everything during this kind of production.
Yeah, what a sweet host he was. And I love this idea that this singular event, even though it only can last minutes, it brings and builds community for a much longer period of time. And we can see by the smile on his face right there that he's pleased to be able to share this with everyone who's in attendance.
I know. I know that everyone who was in a leadership role at that time received a special plaque that he had put together with, the date, an image of the eclipse, the names, NASA, Exploratorium, their city logo. It's beautiful. And I know that one of our colleagues at the Exploratorium has it in her office. And it's a beautiful plaque. We've never forgotten this relationship. We still keep in touch every once in a while. Of course, he's no longer mayor. This was a long time ago. But he's a true leader, a community leader, and we appreciated all the hospitality.
And jumping ahead to the 2016 eclipse that we covered, we were also welcomed into Wooley-Eye, which is an island near Micronesia. And I have an image here of other folks enjoying the total solar eclipse as well on that day of broadcast. Now, you weren't on site for this one, but you were hosting the transmission. Is that correct?
Yes, actually, I was not in Wooley-Eye. I was at the Exploratorium for this one because they could take only a very small crew. I remember they had a 2-day boat ride in a small boat, very rough seas that they had to traverse from Yap to Wooley-Eye in Micronesia. So it was a difficult trek. It was not easy to produce this eclipse from there. But the local community, again, were amazing hosts, and we worked with them throughout the entire week and a half that people were there to inform the community. The community informed us. We took care of each other. I mean, the whole team was just amazing working together. And my co-host, Kira Villanova, she's amazing. She's a Emmy award winner, former Univision anchor woman. She and I do the Spanish language broadcast of Eclipse, and it was our first collaboration on Eclipse, in which we actually just received telescope-only images that were projected behind us at the forum, the big amphitheater or auditorium, excuse me, that we have at the Exploratorium. And we had a Spanish language audience there, and we were just sharing information about Eclipse. We were sharing our own reactions to these beautiful images. It was more of a conversation. It was actually one of our most popular programs, the audio only reactions to this amazing eclipse. And that again speaks to the beauty of our telescope only images, which actually are used by hundreds of museums and other community centers around the world for them to produce their own programs. And of course, the Exploratorium shares all this absolutely for free for educational purposes. And the media many times takes our images because they're the best quality. And that is the important part about sharing these eclipse images. And why is it that we go across the world to capture 2 minutes? It's actually because the scientific quality of our images are unique.
Yeah, and I appreciate the images that we're able to capture as kind of foundational structure to share out that community can also be built around. We actually have an image of you and Kira here from the 2017 eclipse in Casper, Wyoming, as a continuation. This is 1 year after the Wooley-Eye broadcast, but it just shows that there is a community and colleagues who want to share the excitement with you, and really glad that this relationship with Kira continued through 2017 here. Can you talk a little bit about this experience in Wyoming that we called the Great American Total Solar Eclipse?
What was great is just that we were here in, middle America in Casper, Wyoming, a town that I had never visited before. And it's just a lovely town. And I loved being able to share this moment with Kira, do a webcast completely in Spanish, a full webcast this time, a full hour. And we worked with some of our Spanish language explainers from the Exploratorium that were doing demonstrations and doing things with their hands and using everyday materials. And what was great is that we were in a high school. And so many of the students and the families from the high school were with us. So a lot of the audience that you see behind us are actually the community of the high school that was hosting us. And that made it very special.
Yeah, and I was there on the outside of this frame, co-hosting the English broadcast of the total solar eclipse, but we both got to interview this wonderful group of high school age kids who were participating in a citizen science project where they were one of many different data gatherers capturing images of the total solar eclipse. The project was called Citizen Kate, and it was very robust experiment and data collection that they're running, but it was still these enthusiastic young people who were also seeing total solar eclipses for the very first time. And I remember that being very heartwarming to share in some of their enthusiasm.
Yeah, and I think we have a clip of that. If I remember, Kira was the one that interviewed them.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Tell me, how does it work?
She gives us a call and we go to the planetarium and the telescope, and we take data, and this is awesome.
¡Qué emoción! ¿No? Dice él que recibe la llamada cuando es necesario, se acerca al planetario y pueden entonces registrar esta información. ¿Por qué ustedes se han acercado a la astronomía? ¿Saben que quieren ser astrónomos? Can you tell me what's so exciting about astronomy for you? And are you guys planning on being astronomers professionally once you go to college?
Well, it's not what I'm looking into, but I definitely want to go into the science field. Seeing this today has definitely opened my eyes to different types of science and seeing all the different types of reactions that people had, and the sun and the moon. It was
surreal, huh?
It was absolutely amazing.
Es que más la emoción aquí nos consume. Dice él que en su caso lo que le interesa es la en general, pero que hoy ha vivido una experiencia única que no se esperaba y que le está abriendo los ojos a las posibilidades dentro de la ciencia. Tell me.
It was.
Did you expect it?
I mean, of course I expected it, but I didn't expect what I couldn't have prepared for what that was. I didn't expect it.
What you felt.
Yeah, I've seen so many pictures of it, but nothing was close to even what I saw today.
Muy emocionante. Y claro, no le pregunto yo que si esperaba el eclipse. Eso sabíamos que lo esperábamos, pero es la emoción, lo que sentimos al ver esta situación. Y
so that's the end of the clip there, but I think we got a real sense of the emotion those types were experiencing.
I know. I could just these young men are, I think so much into the science, and they're kind of geeks. You can tell that they're science geeks, but they couldn't help themselves in terms of sharing the emotion and the unexpected reaction that your whole self has. That we really are there experiencing this moment in a very holistic way. Not just through our eyes, but our entire self.
Yeah, and as I mentioned at the top of this program, we're now, as of this broadcast, we're 4 days away from another total solar eclipse. We'll be crossing over Chile and Argentina. Unfortunately, the Exploratorium, for health and safety concerns around the pandemic, aren't able to send a crew. But last year, we did have a telescope on the eclipse that happened to also cross over Chile. And I have a promo clip of the expedition out there that we'll take a look at. And there's you and Kira once more. And this was from the 2019 broadcast where you weren't on site in Chile, but you got to recount the eclipse again. Is that right?
Yes. We were together at the Exploratorium in the forum, and we have our little llama there. Some people said, "What's with the llama with the eclipse glasses?" Actually, these very eclipse glasses, that we put on the llama. Well, basically, because in the Andes, of South America, where you see the Milky Way from the southern hemisphere, the Milky Way has a lot of dark molecular clouds.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see shapes in the Milky Way that actually are the dark cloud constellations that the indigenous people of the Andes have recognized for thousands of years. And so they actually see llamas in the sky. And the eyes of the llama are actually Alpha and Beta Centauri, which are the two stars nearest the solar system, but can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. You also see the Southern Cross and the coal sack and things like that, and they will be seen as, the partridge, for example, that will be the coal sack. So it's interesting that the constellations in the Andes are not really done by the asterisms of individual stars that might form a particular shape, like Orion or the Big Dipper here in the Northern Hemisphere. It's more about the dark cloud shapes, and they are related to the animals. And that's why we had the llamas, and actually we got a lot of feedback from our viewers that they really appreciated this cultural connection and a new understanding of how the sky looks different from different parts of the world.
Yeah, not only different because of the actual location, but as you say, the kind of culture that's built around the shared observation of some of these things. We started off this conversation with you talking about how you felt so much more connected to the universe and the celestial mechanics when watching total solar eclipses. But it sounds like there's also a connection to humanity all around that occurs.
Absolutely. And I have to say, we're always so kind of hung up on our technologies, right? We say, oh, we can only look at the eclipse through a telescope or an image, or, during a partial eclipse to protect your eyesight, you have to use these glasses, and everybody goes crazy trying to find these glasses. And I say, forget the glasses, let's go back to first principles. We as human beings have the capacity to use our bodies as the instrument of observation. And so basically the best way to observe a partial solar eclipse is using your hands. If you basically just cross your hands, you can see little squares there done by my fingers. Those little squares, when projecting the image of the sun going through those little squares onto a white sheet on the ground or a white piece of paper or just a sidewalk, each one of those squares creates a camera, like a camera obscura, pinhole camera. And that pinhole camera actually reflects the image of the sun onto the ground. And so you will see, the sun partially eclipsed, this little, almost like banana type shaped suns, all projected onto the ground. And you're using your own body to make that projection. And you can also notice the same effect in nature. Trees, because the leaves actually act as in the same way. These spaces between the leaves will actually create cameras, and because the sun is so far away, you actually project the partial solar eclipse on the ground, and you can see hundreds of these partially eclipsed suns on the ground. Or you can bring your kitchen tools, I have my own here, and use the colander, and you can see these are all pinholes. And then if you project the sunlight coming through these, you will see hundreds or however many there are in here, little holes, but they will all project the partial solar eclipse on the ground. So you don't need the glasses, you just need to pay attention.
It sounds like you just need the curiosity, and I love that solar observations are available to all of us to kind of share in, talk about, using our own bodies and our own tools to experience.
Absolutely.
So are you looking forward to the next eclipse that you're going to get to experience?
I certainly am. First of all, I'm disappointed that we're not going to Chile on December 14th, especially because we worked with our Chilean partners for 2 years planning this event. And again, we became a family, and the mayor of Villarica, Pablo Ateste, and all his crew, his entire staff are just amazing. We wish them the best. The eclipse will happen in South America. So in Chile and Argentina, we'll have the joy of that. And I look forward to seeing some images that are going to be posted on social media. And, we will see the eclipse one way or another. But I'm looking forward to our next 2 productions that the Exploratorium will do in collaboration with NASA. We already have the plans ongoing for that. One is an annular eclipse, what we call the Ring of Fire eclipse. The moon will be slightly farther away from the Earth, therefore it will not cover the entire photosphere of the sun, and it will leave a ring of photosphere. Of course, you have to look at that eclipse with the glasses or project it. You cannot look at it without protection because you may suffer eye damage. But it's a beautiful eclipse. And we're going to be hopefully in the Navajo Nation. We're working with the Navajo Nation right now to establish a partnership. So we're hoping for Monument Valley. And that will be in October 14th of 2023. And then as we develop this arc of eclipse chasing from the first Great American Eclipse of 2017, and now we're on this road to eclipse to the next one, which will be a total solar eclipse that will take place from Texas all the way to the state of Maine, starting in western Mexico, starts in the Pacific Ocean and then comes in through Mazatlan, Mexico. And that will be April 8th of 2024. So we're busy, and we will be busy, and we're very excited about those opportunities. And we are hoping that all of our faithful audiences that have come with us throughout this trajectory will join us again.
Well, thanks so much for sharing your experiences with total solar eclipses, and it sounds exciting that our viewers in North America will have another chance in 2023 and 2024 to experience the power and wonder of the Earth, Sun, Moon interactions there.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, Isabel. Hopefully we'll see you soon next time, and also under the next shadow.
Very good. Thank you so much, Sam. It was a pleasure.
Thanks again, Isabel, for sharing some of your wisdom and perspective. One of the reasons that total solar eclipses are such a wonder to experience is because they're so rare. If you were to just stay in the town that you grew up in, you might have to wait an average of 400 years for a total solar eclipse to go over your head. That's why, if you want to see one, it's usually more convenient to go and find one instead of waiting for one. Before the advent of satellite broadcasting, there was no way to see a total solar eclipse unless you were there. That's why, for the past 30 years, the Exploratorium has been working to bring the eclipse to as broad an audience as possible. Instrumental in the broadcast is our Chief Science Officer, Dr. Rob Semper. We'll have a conversation with him to hear an oral history of the Exploratorium's eclipse broadcast and all of the time, technology, and talent it takes to make it possible. Dr. Rob Semper is the Chief Science Officer and Senior Director of Educator Engagement. Before joining the Exploratorium in 1997, Rob taught physics and conducted solid-state and nuclear physics research. He received his PhD in solid-state physics from the Johns Hopkins University. Over the years, he has had a career in developing exhibits and exhibitions on-site and worldwide, creating teacher education programs, producing publications, films, online media, communication programs, expanding the informal science education field, and leading major initiatives, including the recent relocation of the institution to Pier 15 in 2013. In 2018, Rob was selected as a member of the Federal STEM Education Advisory Panel. Before we jump in with Rob, first take a look back at this montage clip of the past 30 years of eclipse coverage by the Exploratorium. Well, thanks, Rob, so much for joining us and helping tell the story of some of the Exploratorium's broadcasting of the total solar eclipses. We just watched this incredible supercut of all of the eclipses the Exploratorium's broadcast from 1991 all the way to last year, 2019. You've been instrumental in all of them because you've been part of the Exploratorium since 1977. But this history of broadcasting celestial events goes a little bit back before that, doesn't it?
Yeah, so, well, thanks for having me. And I'm really excited to tell some of the stories about us covering these solar eclipses. Um, but I'd like to roll back to 1974, which was an amazing event held at the Exploratorium. Back at that time, we're sort of used now to lots of images coming from space, satellites broadcasting. We broadcast the eclipses and everything. Back then, it was much rarer to really see these images, for the public to actually see them come in real time. And in 74, Pioneer 10, which is a satellite that went out to actually map the outer planets, was operated out of Ames Research Lab down here on the peninsula. And George Bowling, who was a video artist who was working at KQED and elsewhere, was engaged with that project. And he came to the Exploratorium with the idea of actually presenting the actual live imagery coming from that satellite for a public event here in San Francisco. And he basically said, I can actually send the signal to show you what the people in the control room down at Ames are going to be seeing in real time the first time we get these close-up images of Jupiter. And so an event was held here at the Exploratorium, large monitors all over and some projected screens to show this event. And the public, for the first time, got to actually see and experience a live broadcast of this amazing scientific event of the first close-up pictures of Jupiter. The story is there's about 25,000 people who got to see these images that first week when they were shown. And what was interesting about that was how the public was just fascinated by participating in this live discovery event. And that really, I think, is the core really of all of this work that we've done about broadcasting live events, to give the public the chance to experience the excitement that scientists feel when they first get to see this data from satellites or from other kinds of missions. So that was really the start of the Exploratorium's experience with presenting current science, live science, real-time science to a public. And that continued to the first eclipse broadcast, which was actually in 1979 at our intrepid band of folks at the Exploratorium, Larry Shaw and Ron Schwinn and others, and actually broadcast that eclipse back using some new technology that had been invented based on satellites. There was actually some satellites that were launched that were going to be used later, but the amateur radio group got permission and got put together a project to actually use them for slow scan television broadcasts. We presented it in the McBean Theater here at the Exploratorium. And we announced in the paper this might be happening. And lo and behold, lots of people showed up to see this eclipse. And we realized that the eclipse was a very interesting project because not only was it exciting to see, we actually knew exactly when everyone was going to happen from now for the next 100 years going forward. We could actually use it as a programming tool. We could actually create an event, an experience around it that was, except for the weather, was actually predictable.
And so these images, these two examples, you talk about turning kind of facing the laboratory, the control room outward, and letting what researchers and scientists typically get to see, but turn it out for the public to see. Can you give us a sense, though, of at this time in the 70s, what those images looked like if we were to experience them in the studio?
Yeah, so of course, this is before people had really great cameras on these satellites, or slow scan television, came in line by line. It was pretty slow. It was kind of, back when HD didn't exist, back when things were pretty fuzzy. Even so, the electricity of having an event happen, an actual eclipse happen, or seeing the first picture of Jupiter was incredibly powerful. And I was struck, I wasn't here for the flyby, but I was for Baja. I was struck by how emotionally powerful it was to see an eclipse on a grainy television screen. And it really made it just was really awe-inspiring, just even at that level of quality, which is nothing like we experience today.
And so part of the story is the advancement of the technology to get higher and higher resolution images. Can you talk about the next steps of technology or other interlocutors who are able to advance the way that we are able to look at these celestial events?
I think the next big stage for the Exploratorium was some very interesting visitation. One was by Larry Kenworthy, who is a video producer, runs a video production company in Marin. He had been experimenting with one of his staff, Aaron Rosen, on creating really good imagery from telescopes, video imagery, particularly to look at the sun and to look at eclipses. He had this idea that he could actually create a broadcast of a solar eclipse and show it to the public. If he came by the Exploratorium and said, "Hey, I want to show you this gear. I've got this telescope. I can put a camera on it. I think we can really do this." And so we had those discussions. We were interested. And then serendipitously, a researcher over at UC Berkeley, Isabel Hawkins, who's now on the Exploratorium staff, an astrophysicist who was working on satellites that UC Berkeley was running at the time, was part of an education project to do education around heliophysics, about the sun in relation to the Earth, that's science, and came by and said, is there something we could do that would help really get people excited about the sun, about the solar physics? And Ron Houston on our staff mentioned, well, what if we actually do a solar eclipse and we do a broadcast of it with really good quality imagery? And we use that to give us a platform to talk about the sun, to talk about the physics of the sun and heliophysics, et cetera. And that really got us underway. And we got some support through Isabel from NASA to help us do our first broadcast. And so in 1998, we actually did the solar eclipse from Aruba, which was the first one of the modern series of eclipses that we started with really broadcast quality television. And to do that, we built a webcast studio in the floor of the museum that actually is designed to look like the Chet Huntley and David Brinkley news studio of the early 60s and 70s. It was meant to mimic television. And it was the idea that the public would come to the Exploratorium, would sit there and watch a solar eclipse happening live with really great imagery coming from the field. We sent our team down to Aruba. We did that broadcast, and was very, very exciting for people here at the Exploratorium, and very, very much, we had a great crowd come to see it. But other things happened at the time and we didn't expect that were really pretty interesting. And that was that this signal, which we brought back by television broadcast, satellite broadcast, standard satellite broadcast from Aruba, passed through the downlink in Atlanta, which is where the satellites often at that time came down and then were sent back up to redistribute. And it passed through the control room there, and a control technician there who saw it coming found, hey, this is pretty interesting. It's not encrypted, it's live, it's real imagery. And so he told his friends in the news business, in various news, like NBC, all the broadcast agencies, including CNN, hey, you're getting real-time images of the eclipse. You ought to watch this. And so that imagery that we were producing there from Aruba was sent around to news people, and that actually broadcast to a much wider audience than we would have had on site. So that was really a revelation that we could actually produce a unique signal that was interesting not only to visitors at the Exploratorium, but it would actually be interesting to a wider public of a real live event.
And we have some of these wonderful images of those public gatherings at the Exploratorium where people amassed around the webcast studio and even stayed in their sleeping bags overnight to watch this event. But as you say, thanks to technology, you don't just have to be there at the Exploratorium to see it, but because it's broadcast, we can share it even wider and wider.
That's right. That really set a series of experiments, and we did broadcasts from Turkey, one from Zambia, another eclipse from Turkey, finally an eclipse from China, from Western China, Xinjiang province. And in each of these had this great opportunity to create really great imagery of the telescope. And we began to add an educational program to it for people that wanted to know more about the science of eclipses, what you're going to see, why are there eclipses, why are there a certain number per year, where do they happen? Why do they happen in those places? And also, it allowed us also to really talk about the fact that eclipses happen all over the planet. And one of the big enterprises here is you have to go where the eclipses are. You have to go where the eclipse weather is going to be great. And you have to figure out how you can be a self-contained unit, because often these eclipses happen in the middle of Africa and Zambia, whether it's in Turkey, northern Turkey, or in Side on the southern coast of Turkey, or in China, where it actually happened on the edge of the Gobi Desert in western China, a place that was incredibly dry, amazing place to be. To do a live broadcast out of China is pretty a miracle by itself, and to do it from that location. So we had to go where the eclipse was. We really had no choice in the matter.
And we have some incredible images from these locations you mentioned, and it sounds like it takes a lot of research and a little bit of luck to make sure that you're in the right place at the right time. But in addition to just being able to showing up and looking up, it requires all this equipment. And we see these images of trucks and telescopes. Can you give us a sense of kind of how much equipment there is and kind of what purposes they serve along the kind of signal feed for how it
Sure.
ultimately gets broadcast?
So when we do a field production, some of the larger ones where we've done our actual, both the telescope feed, which we do a 3-hour telescope feed of the entire eclipse, and then we use that feed to do an educational program embedded, usually from the field. Some of those have required about 60 cases of gear that's flown into various locations and then trucked to the location. What we have are a series of usually 3 or 4 telescopes run by our telescope wrangler, Bill Dean, which are telescopes that broadcast both the white light image of the sun and also the hydrogen alpha image of the sun, which is a filter that lets you see much more of the effects on the solar surface, and also bring into really good detail the prominences and other things that shoot off the surface. All of that gear is then connected to television cameras that are specially mounted, and then connected to switchers and ways to bring the program together. We get the program back to the United States by satellite television. So we have satellite transmission trucks and receivers here in the US, and then distribute it in many different ways. Originally by video on satellite. Now more recently, we do it on fiber, and we also do it in streaming and online fashion. In each case, we've actually added more and more technological capabilities to actually help us reach more people with more imagery, so they can then make use of it in different ways and as they might want to in their own programming.
So the Exploratorium has had a lot of practice doing this and setting this up, but I assume that it always hasn't gone exactly to plan, and sometimes the equipment has other ideas as well, right? So there's still
Right.
room for improvement and advances?
Yeah, so we've had our interesting scares. Usually one piece of equipment breaks, and in China, one of our main switchers broke, and we were actually broadcasting with the help of the local public television version in Western China. And in their truck was a person who had actually gone to Sony broadcast equipment fixing school, who came over and ended up soldering new resistors into the board to make that thing work. So there's always a bit of that. But the other big uncertainty is weather. And it turns out we've been really successful in never having weather problems, but we've come very close. In China, for example, on the Gobi Desert, a very dry place, hardly ever rains. The day of the eclipse, we woke up and it was cloudy. And the clouds just dissipated just before totality. So we were able to get a very clean shot of totality. In Micronesia, where we were on an atoll, which took us 3 days of sailing from the nearest airport to get there with our equipment, there it also was cloudy with thunderstorms and thunderclouds the day. And again, it miraculously cleared just before the eclipse. Some of that is the weather changes as the temperature goes down when there's an eclipse, and some of it is pure luck. So these are always the hazards of something. We know the date precisely, but we do not know the what's going to happen in the location in terms of weather.
And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've expanded and made more robust the technological end. Can you talk about some of the ways we've added on to the program to kind of spread accessibility and increase viewership and potential audience members to be able to see this?
So one of the program's staples has been a 3-hour broadcast of the eclipse from beginning to end, which we provide to people, and people use that in lots of different ways. They use it in their own planetariums, they use it in their own museum programs. The news people use it just to keep stills when they want to show or do news broadcasts in various places. But recently we've added a sonification part to it, which is taking that signal and processing it through electronics that produces audio sound that relates to the visual signal that's happening. And so we've done that with some local composing from some of our staff. And for the eclipse in 2017, we actually did that with Kronos Quartet playing live to the image that was coming forward, which was really an exciting opportunity. And we then broadcast that out to a public. And then in terms of our programming, what we've done is we've added a whole Spanish language program to our work. We've added a mobile app that lets you view the eclipse happening live out in the field. And we've been adding other kinds of animations and other kinds of techniques to let people really experience the eclipse in a more fulsome way.
And as we've mentioned earlier in the broadcast, 4 days from now, there's going to be another total solar eclipse for the second consecutive year over Chile and Argentina. Because of health and safety concerns around the pandemic, we can't send our own crew there. The eclipse will still happen though. But what are you looking forward to in terms of our program that we can experience next time we have a chance to be under the path of the shadow?
Yeah, so in the future, it's really great for those of us in the US because there's going to be 2 eclipses coming up. One in 2023, that's going to be something called an annular eclipse, which means the moon is actually, a disk is smaller than the sun. So it's actually a ring of the sun that is around the moon. So it will not be a total eclipse. It is a total eclipse, but not one that's completely dark, like where the moon completely occults the sun. And that's going to be happening across the US 2023 in the fall. And we're going to be broadcasting that eclipse from Monument Valley in Arizona and in Utah, actually. And we're doing it there in conjunction, not only in English and in Spanish, but we'll also be doing it in Diné, which is the language, the Navajo language, to reach the Navajo population. And then in 2024, there's another eclipse in the United States that starts down in actually offshore in Mexico in Mazatlan, comes through Texas, slices across the Midwest, and finally winds up in Maine and goes off into Canada. And that eclipse we're going to be broadcasting out of Texas right as soon as it crosses the border. And that eclipse is also going to be as big a deal as the one that was in 2017 in terms of the number. In fact, there'll be more people will be in the path or within a few hours of the path than in the last one, which happened as from the West Coast down. So that's going to be also a major event for us. And we'll be adding, again, our mobile activity to it. And again, doing things with our mission scientists who are part of our partners who talk about missions that are going to the sun, like Parker Solar Probe and others. So we can tell the whole story about the sun, about the heliophysics, and about the relationship between the sun and the Earth.
It sounds super exciting, and it's also sounds like a lot of work, but clearly it's worth doing. Can you speak just briefly about kind of what the eclipse lends to the scientific process and the ways that we can experience science in action?
So being in an eclipse is an incredibly profound personal experience. I've seen now 5 or 6 of them. It's amazing to be there. It's very spiritual. It's just a very interesting, strange space to be in. That's why so many eclipse chasers go and do move heaven and earth to get to an eclipse. It's also really great through media, we found. And when you watch it, particularly if you watch it with people, with other friends, etc., it's really a great emotional experience. Scientifically, eclipses have been interesting in the past for various things. Part of it has been this famous study that was done to show that Einstein's theory of general relativity was actually was validated by the lensing of starlight that passed around the sun that was visible during eclipse. Other things have been learned about the sun and about the relationship between the sun and the earth with eclipses. Now we actually can do eclipses all the time because we have satellites that are actually looking at the sun with a disk taking out the sun's light itself. So you can actually see the corona and see it. So actually we can do an eclipse anytime we want. However, it's still valuable to do scientific research with eclipses. And the last one that went across the US, we learned a tremendous amount because we hadn't really seen the eclipse. When in a real physical eclipse, you can get very close to the edge of the sun. So you see more detail about the corona. And then over time, we could map it for the hour and a half it took for the eclipse to cross the US. And so people still do current science on the eclipse, and they still learn something from a scientific perspective.
It sounds like it's the perfect combination for the Exploratorium, an incredible phenomenon that can be looked at and enjoyed and dissected again and again and again.
Yeah, we find that doing them is very exciting. They're up for people to view at any time, and we've done a lot of other projects that help explain, a lot of videos that help explain how eclipses work, what's going on, why you see what you see during an eclipse. So we found it a very, very strong educational piece of work for us to do to help the public really understand what it's like to live with a star, which is really what happens when we're living with the sun.
Well, thank you, Rob, for spending the time to tell some of the story of the process of the Exploratorium's broadcast, and thanks for continuing to advance this mission to bring total solar eclipses to the entire world.
It's my pleasure. It's great to talk to you.
The Exploratorium presents How to Predict Eclipses. To predict an eclipse, we need to notice how the moon moves in the sky. Point a camera straight up and take a picture of the sky when the moon is overhead. Then wait exactly 24 hours and take another. If we compare the two photos, we can see that the moon has shifted its position in the sky. If we take another picture one day later, we'll see that it has shifted again by the same amount. What this shows us is that the moon is gradually drifting across the sky. Over the course of several weeks, the moon will cross the night sky and will begin to be visible during the day, becoming a thinner and thinner crescent. We lose sight of the moon as it gets close to the sun, and then sometimes the moon and sun perfectly coincide, a dramatic event known as a total solar eclipse. One way to predict eclipses is to wait until an eclipse is happening and then try and figure out when will this happen again. After an eclipse, the moon has drifted past the sun. In order to coincide again, the moon will have to complete a full lap around the sky. If we carefully measure the moon's speed, we can predict that this should take about 29.5 days. So we wait until 29.5 days have passed, and nothing happens. The moon missed somehow. A closer look at the moon's motion reveals why. In addition to its sideways travel, we can also make out a slight up and down motion. In order to cause an eclipse, the moon needs to be vertically aligned with the sun. It crosses this line once every 13.6 days, completing a full up and down cycle after 27.2 days. So let's start with an eclipse and follow the full motion of the moon. It completes an up and down cycle after 27.2 days. It reaches the sun after 29.5 days, but is now 2 days into its next up and down cycle, causing it to miss. If we follow the moon for another lap around the sky, we see that things get even worse. It completes its second up and down cycle after 54.4 days, but doesn't reach the sun for another 5 days after that, missing by an even wider margin. If we keep our attention on the sun, we'll see the moon fly by every 29.5 days. There are many close calls, but a total eclipse will not occur until the up and down cycle matches up with the around the sky cycle. They do eventually come back into sync after 6,585.3 days, or 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. On August 21st, 2017, an eclipse will be visible from America. If we look down from space during an eclipse, we see the moon's shadow move across the Earth's surface. Anyone standing in the path of this shadow will witness an eclipse and will be able to predict that there should be another eclipse in 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So let's fast forward 18 years and 11 days. The eclipse still won't start for another 8 hours, and during that time, the Earth continues to rotate. So when the moon's shadow does cut across the Earth, it will leave a trail in a different location, this time cutting across China and heading out into the Pacific Ocean. 18 years after that, a nearly identical path will cross from North Africa into Southeast Asia. This family of repeating eclipses is known as a Saros cycle. This particular cycle is Saros number 145. Every eclipse belongs to a particular Saros, and there are currently 40 active Saros cycles, each generating its own sequence of eclipses on a repeating 18-year schedule. If you look at a map showing eclipse paths over a period of time, such as this one, which shows all of the total eclipses from 2001 to 2025, you can often spot pairs of eclipses that belong to the same Saros. Notice these two paths have a similar shape and are about a third of the way around the Earth from each other. If we check their dates, we see this one happened in 2003, and this one occurs 18 years later in 2021. These are two sequential eclipses from Saros 152. This path from 2001 is a close match to this path from 2019. These are eclipses from Saros 127. Finally, these S-shaped paths are 18 years apart, representing Saros 139. Although these paths are similar looking, they are not exactly the same. Eclipse paths in a Saros cycle gradually change shape over time. For instance, Saros 145 produced its first total eclipse on June 17, 1909, with a path that nearly crossed the North Pole. 18 years later, a slightly bigger path cut around the Arctic Ocean. Cycle after cycle, these sequential eclipses worked their way south, leading to the American eclipse of 2017. This Saros will continue producing eclipses for another 600 years. Its final total eclipse will be visible from Antarctica on September 9th, 2648.
Thanks again for tuning in and learning with us. Keep an eye out for images of the eclipse happening next week, and be sure to join us in 2023 and 2024 for live coverage of the eclipse from the path of the shadow of an annular and total solar eclipse. If you're hungry for more eclipse coverage, check out More to Explore links in our event listing for more science and a live sonification of the 2017 eclipse with the Kronos Quartet. We'll see you next week at After Dark Online Celestial as we look at the longest night of the year, the winter solstice.